You're listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
Hello and welcome to Southpod. I'm your host, John Yarian, and we are recording from the Dig South Conference. We're here in the Thing, in sunny Charleston, South Carolina. And I am pleased to be joined by John Buzzell, president of You Are Here Immersive Technology Labs. And there's a lot to unpack from that title, and it's clear that you're up to some interesting stuff. But John, I want to start in a different place. We were talking a moment ago before we started recording that you have to explain technology to people.
Yes.
Like complicated stuff, really complicated stuff.
Right.
And I've witnessed some of it and benefited from it. I learned.
You survived some of it.
I learned. You gave a presentation earlier about preparing for life without screens or beyond screens or something terrifying like that. I guess before we get into what you do, I'm curious to learn a little bit about how you do it. I mean, how do you balance this responsibility to get people's IQs high enough on the technology you work in to be able to sell it, to be able to integrate it, to be able to get them to where you need to go? I mean, is that just a constant challenge for you?
I think it is. I think, it's funny that you should say getting people's IQ high enough. I actually try to make this as simple and straightforward as possible. Somebody much smarter than me once said, if a tool is hard to use, then it doesn't get used very much. And so with technology, the same goes, that if people can't understand what it can do for them individually, then they're not going to use it. So why would I be wasting my breath? So I really try to remove all of the alphabet soup, the acronyms, the jargon, and try to get to, okay, can we agree that this problem exists? Would you like it to get better? Here are options that might be exciting for you and the people in your life. Do you want to learn more? And as you take people along with that kind of individual or personal conversation, the tech comes just so much more easily. I think people naturally tense up and say, oh God, this is technology, I'm going to get exposed. I'm going to look stupid. I'm not going to survive this interaction. At work, at home, they think they're going to break the internet. And all of us have to get over that, because tech is coming for the rest of our lives, whether we want it to or not.
Well, you make a good point. I think most of us are all much more afraid of embarrassment than we are of ignorance. I'm fine not knowing something. I'd prefer that you didn't know I didn't know it. For me, right. Just for me.
Sure.
I wonder, though, as you talk about the way content is delivered, the way we experience the world around us, which we'll get into in a minute, is it more about working with brands and leaders to help them understand what they can do, or do you find yourself really just warning them about what will be around? Is it wayfinding or warning?
I think that's a great question. And, marketers have strong opinions about whether it's better to go with inspiring messages of empowerment or to key into our natural kind of aversion to loss, where I don't want to be exposed, I don't want to miss an opportunity, I don't want to, leave things on the table or give up ground to my competitors, or do I want to be inspired of all the things that I could do? I think, sociologists or psychologists might say that loss aversion is an easier place for us to go. Our brains are naturally critical and negative, and we focus on things that are threats, even though these days life doesn't include a whole lot of threats. So that's TMI maybe, but like I deal with that inner dialogue a lot. Like, what does this person need to hear to understand the things that our company, we're so passionate about? So it is more of a hopeful message, but it's couched with this warning that this is going to happen whether you want it to or not. And if you get started now, you can actually take advantage, because your competitors probably aren't moving as fast as you could be moving.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to this inevitability of technology, and we can debate whether or not that's good or not good. Right. We agree that it exists, but before we do that, now that we've kind of given folks a sense of where you're coming from in this dialogue, maybe help us understand more specifically what it is you do. Let's locate you in the ecosystem.
So technology is constantly changing, regardless of how comfortable we are with where it is now. For human history, technology has changed the way we work with each other, the way we live on this planet, and it's continuing to do so. Now, a lot of people are still recovering from the last technology transformations of the smartphone or social media or even the PC. And there's another transformation coming, and it is inexorable, it is imminent. We were talking about this morning in the talk, we've reached peak screens. We have...
One can only hope we've reached peak screens.
I mean, screens have shown up in the most inane, ridiculous places, even dating back to like the 80s, like people would carry around the Sony Watchman. Remember the little TV that you
Vividly.
Yeah. So now we have screens on our kitchen counters, we have screens on our refrigerators, in our cars, on our wrists. It's not going to stop. And I think it's the inanity of it is really leading people to need one seamless experience. Hey, Rachel. One seamless experience where they're going to be able to deal with all this technology in their lives.
John's got a fan approaching the desk. We're here at the
your
conference.
Super keynoter for tomorrow, Rachel Sibley from Singularity University, is gate crashing, and it's awesome because she does a much better job than I do explaining the urgency and importance of people understanding immersive tech and how it's going to impact all of us. So Singularity, like you are here, our two organizations help people contemplate this onrush of immersive tech, because the future of computing is immersive, and helps people navigate that and do it in a way that's useful. So whether you're a big company or a brand or an agency or an individual, you're going to need to figure your life out and navigate this next transition. And that's why we feel this mission to help people understand. And that's really what drives the education motivation. It drives the solution finding motivation, is people need help and they don't even know it yet.
Well, and to run the risk of being a little crass and reductive, I mean, literally what do you sell, John? I mean, what is there to buy?
So we sell immersive experiences in augmented reality and virtual reality.
Okay.
We do it with other immersive technologies like projection mapping and LED walls, anything that helps people immerse themselves in an interactive and content-rich experience.
Right.
And we do that for a lot of reasons. Brands will want to do it because they'll want you to imagine your life with their products in it. And that closes, in some cases, an experience gap for people where you can't go on that cruise, so how can we make you feel like you're on the cruise? You can't be on a cruise without being on the cruise, right? You have to get the ticket. Or if you are customizing a supercar, you could go to the dealership for 2 days and customize your perfect car. Or you could do it right in your own driveway and see how it's going to look. And technology lets you do that. Or we work with companies that are experiencing tremendous brain drain, where people that have been on the job for 30 or 40 years servicing critical infrastructure, they're ready to retire. And the young people don't think that stuff is cool. And so there's big chunks of our nation's infrastructure that's just flat out not going to work unless we replace those people. And so simulating what those people have learned, what they go through, and being able to train someplace else in the job site, that is going to help solve a problem that literally keeps the trains running. So.
And it's a really, really fundamental shift. I mean, there's a way to look at this as a progression from screens, but I think there's maybe a fundamental flaw in there, in that in our earliest vernacular around television or screen experiences, there's a voluntary participatory assumption there that you can watch TV or look at TV.
That's a good point.
And presumably you could walk away from it or turn it off, right? So the language is rooted in my decision to be engaged with it. You're talking about being in places. Yeah. You're talking about experiencing something in a way that's on a much deeper level. I wonder, would you concede that that's a fair statement, and if you do, what do you think about that when you can tell an audience or a client it just sees this as the next step, when in reality it's something very different?
Screens are horribly inefficient. The first screen was 1895. I think they lit up in a theater, started showing images and movies, and people would drag themselves to theaters. We still do, and there's, that industry is having trouble right now because there's so many other screens in people's lives. They can consume that content elsewhere. We drag giant TVs into our home. We spend hundreds of dollars to put screens in every place of our life. There is a logistical sacrifice with that, whether you're bringing something to you or you're going to a screen. And there's a focus sacrifice. How many times have we been in a conversation where somebody starts looking at their phone because that screen is the only place that you can interact with that technology? So yeah, you have to opt in for that stuff, and people do. It's like moths to a flame. We're just attracted to these things. But with all of these ingredient technologies like AI, cloud computing, 5G, computing doesn't have to be tied up in a little glowing rectangle anymore. It's tied to place, it's tied to time, it's tied to a spot in the room, and it's tied to a person. And all the major forces for technology and capital in the world all say the same thing. Augmented reality is the next computing platform. And it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be all day long, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and devices are kind of just going to disappear. So what do you do with that? If you got Tim Cook and Satya Nadella from Microsoft and Mark Zuckerberg and everybody saying kind of the same thing, where are companies going to find themselves when computing is out there in the wide world and not just on a laptop or a phone anymore? So that's the urgency that we feel, and we try to help companies navigate that. We build apps, we build experiences, we consult. That's what we sell, to answer your earlier question.
No, it makes sense. And I'll go ahead and say something that I doubt you would say out loud, but you might not. So I think I can get away with it. Gosh, these guys are not staffed for that. They don't have teams for that. That's not a discipline. They don't have a culture of it. And even companies I know that have a culture of innovation, right, or practice groups or whatever sort of hazy, semi-budgeted teams around it, they certainly lack the deep technical expertise and the knowledge base that would really allow them to exploit it. So I almost see a second challenge here, which is even if I were to agree with you, right, if I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 Global 2000 and I get it, quote unquote, the problem merely shifts to, okay, well, what do I do about it?
Yeah.
Right now you freaked me out, John. What happens next?
I'm hugging you, but I'm hitting you a little bit. Right.
Okay. It's a little conflicting, but okay. That's great.
Right. So it's a great question, and I think, somebody, Rachel actually was saying to me earlier that you have to be in a position to know before you can be in a position to have an opinion, before you can be in a position to do something about it. And we're having to move people along all the stops on that train right now. Organizations are largely not set up for this right now. No. It's part of every major transition that people go through. I mean, before the advent of the car, people weren't staffed up to deal with trucks or roads or mass transit. Before the advent of the computer, we didn't have computer programmers. Every transformation is going to require a large sacrifice of time and focus to get through. I was just talking to the good people of Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD, last week, trying to impress upon their students that this is a global supply chain. Ford doesn't make tires, right? They have partners. And similarly, all these kids coming out of the school, they're not going to do this alone. There is already an ecosystem of modelers, animators, lighters, designers, renderers, programmers, people that can be collaborated with to create some of these experiences. And yeah, it's going to require some exotic talent for a while. Smartphone apps did, social did, the web did, PCs did. And then after a period of time, the technology will be democratized and the tools will make it easy for grandma to create her own virtual reality or augmented reality experience. We're just not there yet. And I think we've been spoiled, honestly, over the last 30 years. Things come so much more quickly now, we have to wait a lot less time for it to show up. You know how long it took E.T. to show up on VHS? It took like 15 years, right? And now movies, E.T. was a film back in the 80s for people that don't know.
Yeah, quick programming break. That was a really dated reference, but thank you, John.
But now, stuff's coming out day and date in the theaters as well as VOD. So we've gotten a little spoiled. Well, it's going to take some time. There were print designers in the early days of the web. They're going to be...
Fine. I'm going to keep playing CEO devil's advocate here a little bit, because you're kind of saying two things at once, and if I have to move my company into the future, I have to harness the power of this technology. Yes, it's going to take time. I'll concede that, but I'm not equipped to solve for this internally in any way. I'll probably just look for a startup and buy them. Right? Because there's going to be any number of little shops, guys in garages, smart women in their homes who are innovating this. Maybe they've got a little bit of a product play, a little bit of hardware, I'm just going to sit around, buy it, and graft it onto my machine. Is that?
Yes, and that's what's happened with every prior transformation. It's
Right.
already started with this one. Williams-Sonoma famously just spent $100 million in cash to buy a firm only to do 3D scans of their physical objects, because they believe that the future of their marketing is going to be immersive, where you won't have to go to the store to see what that KitchenAid mixer is going to look like in 100 different colors. You just put it on your own counter and pick your color right there. So they care about that. They're doing that now. But yes, there will be lots of stupid money spent on checking the box without people stopping to consider how they navigate their business through this next technological transformation. And that's where companies like ours come in to help them appreciate the differences between VR and AR. VR takes you someplace else, AR makes here better. And with conversations as simple and as palatable as that, we help people start to figure out, where does it make sense for them, whether they're a business or a charity or an individual, where can they prepare now, creating content or changing how they kind of look at their customer touch points or interactions, and starting to make progress in on those things.
It almost seems like you're suggesting that partnering with a company like yours could be an important interstitial step.
Yes.
Before buying something, before hiring, before this would allow an exploration, a knowledge advancement, maybe some modeling that would even let us know how to spend or in what increments. It doesn't have to be dead in the water or buy a startup.
That's right. And we would encourage people to start small, experiment, try to stay close to the customer in terms of what they need and how this technology could improve it. Do an experiment and learn something from it. We see proofs of concept all the time in like the low tens of thousands of dollars. Sure, you could hire a freelancer, but typically this technology right now is built with teams, not just a person. And so there are lots of great ways for companies, for less than a cost of a social media campaign, to get in and start learning how this next wave of technology is going to affect their business and how to prepare.
So I want to do two more things before we get you out of here. I want to talk a little bit to some part of our audience that's enjoying this but maybe not sure how they plug into it. And then I want to get into your journey just briefly. But we got folks listening to this, or I hope still listening, who are learning.
After the ET comment, we probably lost.
That may have been
it's like Kanye wearing the Trump hat. We probably lost 9
pulling the
million people.
earbuds out.
Right.
But they're hearing this, and they're in a place in their careers or in their entrepreneurial journeys where, look, they're not thinking about buying a company. They're not thinking about hiring you. They know this is coming. And maybe that's a little intimidating.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it from a position that doesn't have the scale or the resources of a larger organization? Do you have thoughts for them? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody's got their own way in on this stuff. You got to find your attachment point. You got to find what inspires you. We just hired a lady by the name of Kathy Hackle, who came to us from HTC, one of the 2 largest OEMs for VR equipment. And she's our futurist. And she's very active in social media. She's got like 33,000 followers on Twitter and other social media platforms. But there is a lot of voices out there right now in the industry. There's a company called Metaverse, Alan Smithson, certainly Kathy Hackle now with us. That's HACKL, if anybody's curious. There's organizations like the VR AR Association, of which we're a member, that help find examples of the good work that people are doing with this technology today. And so first I would say you've got to find your passion, you've got to find your inspiration. Some people care about telling the stories of disaffected communities throughout the world using VR with 360 video. Some people care about training people to use emergency medical devices without having to put them in tense situations where they might be able to perfect their technique before they put anybody's lives at risk. Some people don't care about any of that. I asked Palmer Luckey from formerly of Oculus, like if he was worried about augmented reality. He was like, he used more colorful language than this, but he said, no, I just want to escape. And so some people care about...
insert your own expletive.
That's right.
Yeah, gotcha.
It rhymes with duck. Anyway, you got to find what you care about, because this is pervasive. It will affect everything. And so find something you care about first. And then the community is really open right now. Eventually it will become like this standoff where everybody's got guns pointed at everybody else and like very afraid to share. That's not right now. We're in a golden moment of sharing and help, and everybody's trading tricks with everybody else. So if you want to know how to do something, just ask. Third, I would say the software is free.
Yeah.
And don't be scared. Like, there are great programs like Singularity University that people can spend money and get a world-class education in this stuff. But there are also free tools and free courses that you can get in and learn a whole lot with a little bit of Google searching. So find your inspiration, find some help, and poke around with the free tools, because there's a lot you can learn.
Well, I love that last point, because I do think the fear barrier is really, really huge, and there's a way for folks in all different circumstances to learn more, take a next step, and work the problem, or rather, I should say, work the opportunity, and not be put off. There's a more democratized, and as you put it, kind of welcoming community there than you realize. Mm-hmm. But it's about taking that next step. It's not about knowing everything at the very beginning.
Right.
Speaking of knowing everything, I want to pivot to you a little bit as we close, because John, I got to be honest, you just sound really smart. You've figured all this out. It kind of feels unattainable. Did you just magically apparate like this? How does one become a John Buzzell?
So you've made me very uncomfortable.
That was the point. I'm humanizing you right now, and this is part of the fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Tremendous.
I need to be humbled. 2 beautiful daughters, and I get very confident and egotistical about how amazing they are.
We're here to help with that. We'll break you down.
All right, look, I got really lucky. I was born at a special time. There's some pop psychology books about this, that people that seem to have a talent or skill for something, a lot of it can be chalked up to them just kind of being the tallest kid on the basketball team, or being at a university during the summer when they had access to computers and none of the other students were around. For me, it was like, I got my first computer when I was 6 years old. I had nothing but time. There were no rules. We were hacking payphones. We were dialing into businesses and government computers. We were just having fun. And so I never felt like I was going to break the computer. It was a plaything for me. And even once I was out in the professional world, we were having to be generalists because there weren't courses. Like, it was 4 years after I entered the workforce doing all this kind of stuff before there were specific degrees, people coming out with like computer design degrees or whatever. So I was very lucky.
You're just aging yourself all over this podcast.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
E.T. references. No, please continue.
So anyway, yeah, you're right. Things have gotten so streamlined, so slotted. What's your education track? Are you going to be an omni-channel marketer? Or are you going to be a XR? You know what? We need to drop a lot of that, because this tech is here to solve problems. And if we pigeonhole ourselves, it's really tough to crawl out of that. So for me, it was having those lucky experiences, but also not being afraid to fail, standing up and say, I'll get it, I'll do it. No one else is going to do it. And those are all learning experiences. So I've been very lucky with my experience, and it comes from a little bit of luck and a lot of kind of, just being not afraid to look silly, like I am on this podcast right now. Talking about ET.
Well, what I love about that, and obviously I'm here with you in person, have had an experience of you in person, that you strike me as somebody who has followed your fun and appear to be having a good time.
Yes.
And while we've talked about a lot of they're complicated, serious subjects. Mm-hmm. I think there's something there for anyone listening, that there's a lot of power in that. Do what inspires you, keep chasing it, make sure you're having a good time. And it might lead you to a pretty complex or even a serious or impactful place, but trust it and follow it, because I've got to believe that has something to do with why you are where you are.
I didn't come on this podcast intending to quote Steve Jobs, but he said a really smart thing which was, when you realize that most of the people in the world are no smarter than you, it drops your, apprehensions about sharing your ideas. And you know what? Everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. A lot of us in this industry, our days are more filled with failure than success, although we like to talk about our successes. There's a lot of experimentation and failure, and you've got to put yourself out there. I mean, the same could be said about anything, but technology even more so. You're not going to break it. There's a lot that you can do with just a little bit of knowledge, and people just need to take that first step and find a community. I would love to talk to anybody here at Dig South that is interested in getting into that field, because I feel like it's going to help everybody, the more of us there are out there talking about, this isn't scary, here's how we're going to do it, and iterating on that every day.
Is this where we just give out your cell phone number on the pod? That was a very sincere invite. No, we won't do it.
No, seriously.
I'll mention quickly, too, you're not doing this in Boston. You're doing it in the South. You're headquartered. You live and work in Atlanta, which I think is really interesting and not something maybe everybody would realize right off the jump, that this is happening in the Southeast for you.
Well, the Southeast, I mean, obviously it's got a great story, Dig South. This is the most, we had a huge crowd this year, and it's great to see everybody showing up. Atlanta similarly has a great tech story, but also a production and entertainment story owing to all the film production dollars that are now spent there. There's a lot of corporate headquarters in Atlanta. And I used to be an apologist for the Southeast, even though I spent a lot of my growing up years here, because we didn't have all the things that the coasts had, that the Northeast had. And that's changed. And I think people need to be reminded that that's different and that innovation really can happen anywhere. So we're proud to be part of the Atlanta scene, part of the Southeast scene. We see a lot of opportunities that maybe get overlooked. Although if you're listening from the Northeast, I'm kidding, don't come and take our business.
Leave us alone. Don't do it.
But no, it's good. I mean, the Southeast is a little more diffuse, but there's special stuff happening here.
I love it. Give us the URL. People want to learn more about the lab. youarehere.xyz. It's youarehere.xyz. Drop on by. I'm at Buzzell on Twitter, and the company is at youarehereco. So would love to hook up with anybody that wants to know more about all this immersive technology. We are here to help, and it's been a joy being on the podcast. So John Buzzell, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, where innovators dish on success, failure, and a rapidly evolving South.